Hey everyone, Brandon here, transformation pastor here at Soul City. You are about to listen to a different episode than we normally have on our podcast. We got to sit down with a few people from our church to talk about the significance of Juneteenth. I'm excited for you to hear this episode. So what is Juneteenth? Well, I love what Dr. Orpal Lee says about Juneteenth. She says that Juneteenth means freedom and freedom for everybody. Juneteenth is an annual holiday that commemorates the official end of slavery in the United States. General Gordon made his way to Galveston, Texas in 1865. Although Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation in 1862, legally freeing the slaves, Texas did not inform the enslaved people about it. We're talking about 250,000 enslaved people that were set free. And the story goes that when the news spread to the enslaved people in Galveston, when the general's order was read to them, they broke out in exuberant celebration, and we've been celebrating ever since. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome again. We're so glad that you're with us. My name is Brandon, and I'm the transformation pastor here at Soul City, and I'm joined by some friends, and I want to let them introduce themselves.
Yeah, my name is Richard Mayo. I'm the comms manager here at Soul City. Been here for about a couple of years now. I sing on the worship team, lead the social media team, photography team. Whoop, whoop. Shout out to all my peeps. And yeah, just excited to be here for this conversation.
That's awesome.
Great. I am Bianca Lackings. I was formerly had the privilege of being on the Soul City staff. And now I lead a table group here. Shout out to the 20s. And I've been attending Soul City for about 3 years now.
Nice.
Yes.
Nice.
Excited to be here.
Hey, and I'm Cliff Goins. Family has been attending Soul City for about 11 years now. Someone asked me what I do at Soul City the other week, and I could joke that I'm the special projects guy, but I used to do a little work on the elder team, and also really involved in financial stewardship. And then by day, I'm an investor and entrepreneur, and also an author. So there you go.
Nice. Okay. Let's go.
Yeah.
Well, again, I want to thank you guys for being here and being willing to have this conversation around Juneteenth. And man, it's such an important conversation. And I want to also just name that for some, depending on who they are, where they come from, this could be a difficult topic to talk about. It could bring up, challenging emotions or thoughts. And, we're aware of that, but I love the fact that you all are willing to dive in and to explore this topic. But before we get too far, before we jump into the deep end, I just want to get to know you a little bit. We just want to have a little fun. So what we're going to do first is we're going to do some rapid fire.
Let's go.
Juneteenth edition.
Awesome.
Rapid fire questions. Okay.
All right.
I love it.
So first, who is your favorite Black historical figure? Give you a moment to ponder in your hearts.
You want to go first?
Y'all really?
I think
Right.
as if we didn't know. I think one of mine is Toni Morrison, author Toni Morrison. I think that I just really appreciate the way she communicated around the Black experience, the way that she took matters into her own hands to articulate things that she hadn't, read before or seen be articulated before. I just think it's really important and I really appreciate Black historical figures that gave us language, because that just feels so vital to me. So, Toni Morrison.
Come on.
I love that.
Yeah.
I'm going to cheat a little bit. I mean, mine is like MLK all day. That said, I used to be a part of a speaking troupe back in the day as a young child. And the speaking troupe was run by a historical figure by the name of Mamie Till Mobley. And so Mamie Till Mobley was essentially my second mother as I was growing up. And our group went around the city as well as the country reciting MLK speeches.
Wow.
And so I say Martin and Mamie, but mostly because they really are about the business of advancing social justice.
Yeah.
The other thing I would say about Mamie is she really, really, really loved the kids after hers was taken from her so brutally back in 1955. And so, yeah, Martin and Mamie, mash up.
Love that. I love that. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, I was thinking like first of mine was MLK from childhood perspective, but as the older I get too, and coming from a musical part now, I'm thinking like, well, wearing the hoodie, Nina Simone.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of some strong Black women like Billie Holiday that just stood against the grain, whether it was Strange Fruit, right, with Billie Holiday, just those strong Black women that often don't get the credit that they deserve, but are such like the foundation and strength of our people and of our culture, and just unapologetically doing it too. You know, so I'm gonna go that artistry route with a little bit of Nina Simone and a little bit of Billie Holiday.
I love it.
That's good. That's good. Now, what is one phrase, the phrase that your mom would say to you when you knew it was that time? Like you better listen, or else. What was that phrase?
Did I tell you? No. Oh, yeah. No, it would be just saying my name. And that there's no blinking. It's looking you dead in your eye. Like in the birth given name, that biological name, like Richard. It wasn't no nickname. It wasn't Sun, it was Sunshine. No, it wasn't all that. Richard, dead in my eye. Like, yeah, I knew it was like, okay, yeah, or yeah, I'm just leave it there. Yep, that was it.
I think mine would be like the full name. So when I grew up, my nickname was Tony because I'm a fourth. My dad was also Cliff, so he was always Cliff. My middle name is Anthony. But if I heard Clifton Anthony Goins, yeah, it's a wrap, brother. It's a wrap. So yeah, it was over after that.
It's done.
See, mine wouldn't be the name. It was the way she did it. She would curl her lips and she would just say it to me. We could be in the store. We could be around 1 million people, but only I heard it. And it would be like, come here. And I'd be like, no. Like, no. Did anybody see it? Nobody saw it. Nobody worried. And that was her goal. So that'd be mine. If she had to get me together, she had to gather me. That was it.
I would say, yeah, my mom was very similar. It was the like tone of her voice and the way her face would kind of morph into something different. I just knew. Exactly. I'm like, oh, it's about to go down.
Sometimes too, like the words didn't even have to be present. It was just that look.
Right.
That look. I think Felicia Rashad, there was like a reel or meme going around with that look, and everybody recognized that look.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That side glance. Yeah.
Bless.
Yeah. Okay. So you're celebrating Juneteenth, right? What has to be there? What are you listening to? What are you eating? You're at is it a cookout? What is it? Like, let's just talk about that. What's it look like?
Yeah. Definitely gotta have food. So some barbecue ribs is my fave. Barbecue ribs, side dish, gotta have mac and cheese somewhere in the equation. And then some
can't cook that though, but
exactly.
No, and it ain't no craft. My Lord, shout out. No, nothing against. Yeah, but it ain't gonna be no crab. It's gonna
is it the elbow mac and cheese or is it the spaghetti mac and cheese?
Ooh, now see, I'm from the West.
These are the questions.
So these are the questions. But then it's like,
what is spaghetti mac and cheese? Somebody please.
What is?
Yeah.
Goodness. Well, that's that Southern New Orleans family thing. My mom only made spaghetti mac and cheese. In fact, only in the past couple years did she start making it the elbow normal way. And I was like, oh, you can do this? I didn't know that you could do this. I knew other people could. I just didn't know you could. But it's once you have it, you'll never go back. It's just the noodles. It's just a shift, a minor shift in the noodle.
Okay.
Wow, I'm being educated already.
But yeah, it's not like, I mean, you got to have more than one cheese too. Like, it's got to be that mix, and then just baked and just, bless the Lord. But yeah, so Juneteenth for me is going to consist of some barbecue and some great mac and cheese, maybe some barbecue beans, something like that. Some greens going to be on the stove too. Just that normal kind of cultural food that we like to do. So it is more that cookout vibe.
Okay.
I'm on Juneteenth. Yeah.
Got you. What about for y'all? What's it look like?
Yeah, I mean, this is where I get into, like, I have kind of mixed emotions about it. So I didn't really grow up celebrating it. So, like, this is all kind of new to me, even just in the last couple of years. And not everybody is recognizing it as a day of observance or even as the federal holiday it is. So the last couple of Juneteenths, I was actually working. And I technically work for myself this year, but I also will be working while people are listening to this podcast. And so I'm still navigating through it. I do agree and think that the vibe I would like would be more of a kind of a cookout vibe. But I'm still working through the whole Juneteenth thing, which I'm sure we'll get into later.
For sure, yeah. We're going to circle back. We're going to circle back to that.
That is such a good point. I feel like my dream Juneteenth is cookout or block party-esque.
Ooh, I like that.
You know, it's the speakers, it's song-wise. I'm thinking like we got to have like Before I Let Go.
Oh, come on.
Maze and Frankie Beverly or Beyonce. Shout out to
Let's go.
my other Gen Zers who also want the Beyonce version. And then I don't know. I think it's just everybody having a good time. It's just not too much.
Yeah.
It's what we do on the 4th. It's literally just like kick back and eat and celebrate.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
But I feel that
Pre-4th is a pregame for the 4th of July.
Exactly.
Got it.
That's good. It's chill. It's fun. There's food. I love it. But yeah, Cliff, you kicked us off, and I would love to dive into that. And I want to ask you three, did you grow up celebrating Juneteenth? What did that look like for you?
Yeah, no, I as well. Yeah, I never heard of Juneteenth until a few years back, and yeah, it did not. I was from Vegas. We didn't have it. Like, it just was not mentioned. But I was so intrigued when I heard about it. I ain't gonna lie. At first it was like that, hey, another day off. Oh, potentially. Not yet fully realized. Yeah, so I never heard of it growing up. It wasn't taught in school. It just was not mentioned at all. But I was intrigued by it when I heard about it, for sure. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I feel similar. I think growing up, I hadn't heard anything about it. It wasn't until either like college or maybe even a little in the last few years, like you said, maybe even a little after college. And I think my first feeling, as I feel when I learned many quote unquote like new facts about Black history is about history is just how we don't learn enough in school. Like immediately I was like, the education system, because it's like, these are things that it is mind boggling that we are just finding this out. And it also just feels, it's such a, it is such a upsetting thing at the end of the day, like to not know your history and for us to kind of just move around such important facts. So I think my first feeling was like a immediate like gut punch of like, dang, here's another thing that we're just now learning about ourselves. That's crazy. That we should have learned when we were school age, just like we learned about Independence Day and Gettysburg and any other random thing I can name to you that is
that's real.
Less significant to me and to my experience in America. So.
I love what you just said. So no, did not celebrate it coming up. As you brought kind of this even concept to me though, Brandon, it caused me to reflect, and I realized I lived in Minneapolis after undergrad. I'm the old guy on at the table. This was in 1996. And it made me go back to memories like, oh, wait, there were people celebrating Juneteenth in Minneapolis. And so I'm like, wait, so I'm a nerd. I started researching and I'm like, oh, so I go through it and I find out in 1996, Minnesota became, I think, maybe the fourth state to even recognize it as an observance day. So out of all the 50 states, they became the fourth state. Most other states really hadn't recognized it until the 2000s. And a lot of the states really not until George Floyd and kind of beyond. And so so then I realized, it's not that surprising that we didn't celebrate it and I didn't know about it. And I have the same, I don't know, gut punch feeling around just the fact that we just don't learn Black history in school. And I have high school age kids right now, and the stuff that they learn about U.S. history is very light touch on the Black experience, and definitely light touch on the real Black experience. So,
yeah. And earlier too, like I was saying, like it was another day off, but thinking that like, cause the fourth and what you were saying, Bianca, too, like really resonated. Just the fourth didn't really hold that much value for me, if any. Like I was like, this is not a holiday for me. We were not free, on the 4th of July. So it's like, why am I celebrating this day? So to me, all the 4th had ever been was just a day off. And then it was like Juneteenth is in May. So first thought is like, oh, another day off. But then it's like hearing that meaning. And then that, truth be told, anger on like, why haven't I been taught this? And then especially in the context of how things are now with it seeming our history trying to be erased, it's like it just makes that fire burn even more, and now feeling even more the importance of communicating the importance of Juneteenth, because we can't rely, unfortunately, on the educational system to actually educate when it comes to Black culture and Black history.
Yeah.
So for me, I still have mixed feelings about it, though. I mean, if you think about the holiday itself, it's because it took 2.5 years for our officials to communicate that this had been declared. That's kind of crazy to me. So
it is.
I'm sure it didn't take 2.5 years to get from the D.C. area to Texas. Definitely took longer than it does now, but not 2.5 years.
I was able to talk to my therapist, and I had totally forgot this, like up into literally Monday, that he is from Texas. And at the end of our session, I was like, hey, did you grow up celebrating Juneteenth? He's like, oh yeah. And he begins to tell me just what it was like to celebrate Juneteenth in the late 60s and 70s, and the block parties and festivals and the fun. But he just gave me a perspective that was so unique, in that he's like, we spent time recounting the history, reflecting. There was an educational component attached to every year's celebration. He talked about how, there were restrictions on Juneteenth that limited the number of people who could gather in one location.
Wow.
So he just had a very unique perspective, and it gave me a broader perspective on it. And something he talked about was just noticing the commercialization of Juneteenth, being from Texas, and it makes me think of the question: well, what do you all see Juneteenth meaning to you personally, like right now? Knowing, okay, you didn't necessarily grow up celebrating it, neither did I. If you find the significance of it today, but what does it mean now?
Yeah, for me now, and sitting and listening to pioneers like Dr. Opal Lee, right? And just hearing what they did in Texas, and it being more than just the cookout, now for me, it holds this significance to where there is this educational part of it. And she also shared in an interview how they shared resources. They taught, like youth how to get a job, things like that. And so for me, now it holds that space of recognizing our history, celebrating our resilience as a people, but then also ensuring that our people know our history and they are equipped to live in this world that we are still fighting for justice in.
Yeah. That's good. Yeah.
And some food too. We still gonna eat. We still gonna eat, listen to some music, but we gonna learn some stuff too.
The spaghetti mac and cheese.
Exactly. That's spaghetti mac. Yeah, I feel like, to me, one thing I always think of is that Black people have a extraordinary way of turning grief to joy and finding a way to celebrate within the grief and within the, sadness, violence, whatever it is. So I think that, I don't know, I find myself with this holiday somewhere in the middle where it's like, I really like education. I feel like the emphasis on education is prime. I think that is so important because it's what we were just talking about. That's how we got here to this point where, half of us don't even know that this is the truth. So I love education, or like making it education centered. But then there's also a piece of me that are just like, dang, can we just celebrate? Like, I feel like we Black people, we don't get the chance to just like celebrate and just have that be it sometimes. So it's part of me that's like, I also just want us to like make this a day that like is truly for us. And I would love if, it can be treated as a true holiday. Like, I feel like, what do, people are like, well, what should we do on Juneteenth? I'm like, what do you do on every other holiday? It ain't gotta be that different, and there is an educational or like a factor where what the holiday is about, and there's true recognition of the holiday, and that is very important. But then I'm also like, and let's just kick it, and let's just laugh, and let's acknowledge all the Black nuances and the culture and the music and
let me make you some spaghetti mac and cheese.
Let me make you some spaghetti mac. Like, just come and rest and be blessed and feel good and have it be a good day.
I love it. I feel like I'm gonna be a Debbie Downer then. So I'm super obsessed, I would say, with the wealth gap in America. So the book that I wrote is about that. Comes out next April.
Come on,
shameless plug. Minding the Wealth Gap. And it's about how all of us have a role in closing the gap. And so as I started thinking about what this day will mean to me kind of going forward, actually I was actually pushing for a Juneteenth release, but it's not happening. It's because it's an opportunity for us to reflect on the fact that, hey, we were free from slavery. But for me, it also points to the anemia of progress that we've made in 150 plus years. So there has been progress, but when you look at health gaps, wealth gaps, education gaps, incarceration gaps, all the gaps, we have a long way to go. And so for me, it starts to be almost like a call to action. So I would love, let's celebrate. But I think I'm holding to that duality as well. I'm like, also let's call to action, right? So hopefully that wasn't too much of a downer, but that's
I think you are. I think so many things in life, right, have two sides. And when I think about Juneteenth and I think about like what you said, be the unique way that we as a people have we could just turn a tragedy into joy, into triumph. I think it's a moment. Juneteenth's a moment for us to celebrate, to have fun, but then to also reflect that we have more to do and we are doing more. And when I think about Juneteenth, it's for me a symbol of strength in a lot of ways, amongst many other things. But I would love to know could you all share a moment or a story in your life where your faith helped you to overcome a challenging time?
Yeah. So like in school and studying like liberation theology as well, and just seeing how much in scripture God is with those on the margins, with those that are deemed like less than, those who are different, and those who are also broken in spirit. Think of the passage that he's near the brokenhearted, right? For me, I think, especially in my mid to late 20s, it was just a huge season of brokenness for me. I got divorced, and I lost a child, and it was in that season, and not understanding. I started studying God, suffering, and evil because I raised the question. I'm like, God, how could you allow this to happen to my kid? Why do bad things happen to kids, to people that are already oppressed? It was just like diving deep into that and searching for answers. And it was one of those things I literally told God, and I think it's just a lot of faith instilled in me from my mom, from my father, grandparents. I literally told God in the midst of that season when it happened, I was like, I don't understand. I don't know why this has happened. But I know too much about you and I love you too much to leave you now. And I had to begin to form and strengthen my relationship with God in a space of not knowing all the answers. And I don't know what personality type I am or if that falls under one of them, but I like to know, the ins and outs of all. And so could I deal in that space with that? And then and honestly, in studying and then just really just spending some time with God, allowed me to get into that space where my faith was strengthened. And I think even my resilience was strengthened. And yeah, it's built me up a lot into the person I am today, and to keep the faith that, I used to, as a people, yes, we can dance in the rain, we can do that. But now it's just, it's a new type of dance I feel in my life, with God. And so, still don't know all the answers. Yeah. But I know God is present. And I've leaned more on God being, and even in the word, being more about wisdom and relationship, than knowing all the answers. And so,
yeah, that's good.
Yeah. I guess where I think about the intersection of faith, perhaps not as much as overcoming hard stuff. Certainly, I didn't grow up super wealthy or anything, but done fine and well in life, mostly because my parents basically made sure we kind of got into the right, essentially, education flow, because that kind of helps you kind of level up and move to the next level. And so where it comes into play for me is just around what really is, as believers, like what is our call in the earth. And a lot of it is about reconciliation. And so as I think about maybe how God has gifted me and the places he's given me passion, particularly around kind of finances and the wealth gap and all these different things, how do I kind of take the faith and take kind of the gifts and things that he's given me and really step in as an activist, right? Versus just being happy that, my family and I are doing well. And so that's really where I'm seeing kind of that faith interaction. Yeah, certainly as coming up as an investment professional in essentially what's really a white man's world has been really, really tough, and actually still remains that way. But I guess I think less about that as being, I guess that is a, kind of systematic thing. But I think more about how can I really make and maximize the impact with what God has given me.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And you kind of touched on this next question too, Richard, which, when I think about Juneteenth, for me, I can't help but to notice the parallels of, between Juneteenth and what Jesus has done for us in a spiritual sense, right? We know it's beyond just spiritual, but I think about, in a sense, we were slaves to sin. Actually, Romans tells us that we are slaves to sin. Through the cross, through our faith in Jesus, we have been set free. And essentially all of the oppression we've experienced, and through sin and evil and all of these things, Jesus is the answer. He's our freedom. And I think you would know way more about this than me, studying liberation theology, but I think of that phrase from James Cone. Did I say his name right? Okay, great. That he is the Jesus is the God of the oppressed, and the reality is and then circling back to what you said, Cliff, is like there's still oppression. There's still a massive gap. We haven't arrived. We're not living in this complete freedom from oppression. So how do you all reconcile? How do you reconcile that middle space of that in between, that space of, okay, there is some progress, but it's not the, we haven't made the ultimate progress of freedom in all things. And then knowing that God is in it still. Like, how do you reconcile that?
Dan?
Man, I think of times in my faith where or even times just in my experience as a Black woman, where I've hit this wall over and over again, just feeling like this is too much, and it feels like there's no end in sight. It feels like we're so far from true solutions to understanding. It feels like we're making steps backwards. It feels like the oppression is there and it's rampant, but it's becoming like concealed, and it's becoming, like sort of passive aggressive. And I just come to this place where I keep being like, God, what are we to do about this? Like, this truly, what are we to do? Like, it just feels like it's too much for us. And then at the same time, it always like brings me back to the fact that, yes, it is too much for you. Like, I just feel God being like, that is correct. Welcome home. Hello. Like, and it's this moment where I feel like, yes, the oppression is not, it is alive and well. But I think that is what continues to bring me back to my faith in the Lord and remind me that my job is not to end the oppression by myself. My job is to do what I'm called to do, to stay close to the Lord, to move with him, to walk with him, and he will do that work in me, through me, with me. But it's not my, it is not my burden to bear fully. Like, I just can't, So I think for me, I just find myself, it's kind of a cycle, right? It's a cycle of kind of getting to my wit's end and feeling so hopeless that it then brings me back to my dependence on the Lord, and just the reminder of Jesus, and the reminder that as the oppressed, we can see ourselves in him so vividly, right? And we see this picture painted for us actually of that we can so easily connect to our own journey in our own lives, right? And I think that I almost end up just finding so much fruit in that. Like, I just see like, wow, God, actually, the fact that there's no barrier to me and your word in this way where I feel like I'm above this, or I feel like I'm taking myself out of this narrative. In fact, I see myself, in Jesus so clearly because of how you had him walk through this world, and that is so intentional of you. So I think it just brings me back to praise. It brings me back to faith. But I like many of us, I imagine, just, you hit a wall of just feeling like, dang, what do we do?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I was often saying during COVID, I was just like, it's exhausting being Black in America, but I wouldn't trade it for anything at the same time. And sometimes it just seems like it just takes so much effort just to show up. And when I think of like even biblical passages, like I think of the persistent widow, and she kept showing up. And in this season, that passage is really taking a new life for me. It's just like, I got to keep showing up. I think of lyrics to lift every voice and sing, let us march on, till victory is won, like continue going, continue fighting for justice. And then realizing too, that you are not alone. Yes, community around you also fighting for it, but also that, God is with you in that as well. Jesus is with you. Earlier I said, I don't have all the answers. I'm still wrestling, in that space of ambiguity. It's in a sense, of like, God, did you allow this? Did you, all of that I'm wrestling through. But I hold firmly to the fact that like God is on the side of the oppressed, and God is there with us and with those in the margins. And so, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I think there's a big part of the population that don't believe that Black folks are still quote unquote oppressed, especially as you think about the maybe historical context of oppression. And so that becomes even another battlefield that that's hard to navigate. For me, it's hard. Like at the end of the day, one of the things the scripture talks about is that one, in this world you'll always have trouble, but also the fact that, hey, sin entered the world, and with that it brought all the things that we talk about, oppression, pain, and all of those different things, bad things happening to good people, right? And the fact is, God sent Jesus to reconcile that, but then he essentially commissioned us to continue that work of reconciliation. And, I don't purport to really truly understand it, but that call to actually sit in the in-between and to do some, to your point, some of the reconciliation work, but also understand that it's not on you to reconcile everything. And that's hard. So, some of it is like, how do you, like Kaiser Soze, like how do you convince somebody is there that there's something that's there that people don't believe is there? And then how do you then pull other people, because you need other people and other resources in that work of ending the overt and covert oppression that Black people experience.
Right.
What's really funny is not really funny, but just one of the facts that I uncovered in doing research was I looked at friendships between Black people and white people. And so I found out that basically 3 out of 6 or half of Black people only have Black friends. And then when you look at the white population, it's actually 4 out of 6. So it's 33% more, right? Only have white friends. And so you have a big swath of the population across the states that don't even have any hand-to-hand combat relationships with people of the other race. And so, it's hard to understand that when Black people are complaining about this, that, and the other, they are like, hey, well, you were freed in 1863/1865. You know, you got the Civil Rights Act 100 years later. You should be good.
Yeah.
And we know that that's just not the case. There are some of us who have done fine and well, still fighting through the same types of things that you talked about. But many of our households have not fully benefited from being in this quote unquote freedom. And so, you know, some of our work is to try to continue to lift the voices around the issues and continue to try to drive it. And it's hard work.
Yeah, that's a good point, Cliff. And I would love to dive into that more for those who are listening or watching and they're interested, right? What could individual Christians do? What are some practical things that folks can do to lean into social justice, to lean into some of these issues that are still persistent today?
Yeah, I would say first people need to listen. Well, evaluate your circle as well, because if your circle is all looking the same way, I feel like that's part, like you just mentioned, or Cliff, like that's part of the struggle right there in itself, right? And you need to be like, people need to begin to have conversations and really listen to each other. Listen to the voices. Don't just rely on, what your parents or what people in your normal context say, but really come with that open heart to listen. And personally, I feel that the church, Big C Church, struggles with that greatly. We're so quick to regurgitate scripture that we have not studied historical, social context of. We have not exegeted the text, right? To be able to
exegesis.
Come on. But to really have that kind of spiritual conversation, and to see the ministry of Jesus, and I think there's that reflection too, and reflecting really in your faith and in the walk of Jesus. Jesus wasn't sitting there with the religious elite. He wasn't sitting there with the Sadducees and the Pharisees. Jesus was with the tax collector, those deemed less than in society. And so who are you having conversations with that is not part of the status quo or the majority? And are you listening? And I think, and then once you listen, use your voice. It's not easy, but at the same time, it's not easy for us living this day in and day out. At least, white people have the privilege to sit back in their whiteness. We don't ever get to shed this, And so I would say to have those hard conversations, put that hard post up on social media. You might lose some friends, but at the end of the day, raise your voice. I think there's more allies that are needed in this space. And I've heard somebody speak on it once that said, this can't be solved by just one side of the equation. We need both sides, to solve this and to listen and to speak and to work together.
Yeah, that makes me think of that quote. I think it was first said by Fannie Lou Hamer. And it's nobody's free until everybody's free, right? And I think that for me, the first thing that comes to mind is feeling connected to it. Like what both of you just said, the idea of people being able to remove themselves from it and say, well, I don't see that happening, or, well, I haven't been impacted by that, or I know this one Black person and they don't seem like they're impacted by that. And the reality is America has had a problem with even recognizing and acknowledging what has happened. We, as a country as a whole, have not even acknowledged that this is an issue, that this, that Black people have been oppressed actively, and what that, all the gaps, as you said, Cliff, that has resulted in today. So I think when you even think about that, the fact that our country on a larger scale cannot even reckon with what we've done. It's like, well, what they've done.
Or even losing the Civil War. Let's get
going
to the South.
Get into it.
You see the flags everywhere. But
and I think that just it's a persistent ignorance, right? And ultimately, as people, and if you are someone who is looking to be an ally, it's identifying how am I benefiting from this today, because I am, the way it is you just truly are benefiting from it, and it does impact you, just not the same way. So I think it takes your own personal reckoning, and saying, where am I disconnecting from this, and where am I being choosy with this almost. And then I agree with raise your voice, and I think even 2020 was impactful for me because it was such a weird time where everyone opted into people stepped into this, and then they were like, okay, we're done, cool, and they stepped out. And I think that it's uncomfortable. Like, if you are non-Black and you step into racism, or you step into and decide to acknowledge the monster that is racism and oppression in America, you want to step out of it. And shout out to you if you're able to do that. But the reality is many are not. Yeah,
step out of it. That would be awesome.
Just step out for one day.
That would be awesome.
That'd be crazy. So I think
that would be crazy.
To be so for real, it's really just actually acknowledging the privilege that you have, and educating yourself, and acknowledging how your connection to it.
That's good.
And then acting based off of that, as we were saying.
Yeah, I guess I go really practical with it around, how believers can help with the problem, right? So one is just really maybe back to something we talked about earlier, just understanding kind of what is the fundamental role of a believer in the earth. And it is about reconciliation. Obviously, it's reconciliation of people to God, but then you have kind of offshoots of what that actually means. And so for me, it's one, just fundamentally coming to grips with, hey, what is it? What is the work that we're called to as believers, right? But then I get really, 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 really practical, which is, hey, I talked about some of the gaps that exist, but there are just tons of gaps that exist between. If we just want to keep it black and white, you can look at other gaps as well. And so my question would be, well, what types of things kind of tug at your heart and are you passionate about, right? So like if you're passionate and gifted in healthcare, then why don't you work on some health equity stuff, right? If you're a nerd like me and you just love economics and finance, why don't you use your money, resources, and networks to step into that gap, right? If you just love real estate and real estate only, right? Then why don't you help with that gap? If you believe the kids need more knowledge, why don't you step into that gap? And so I think that we can get really, really, really practical, and it's going to be uncomfortable, but actually can be probably less comfortable as if you link it to what it is that God has called you to. And so that's what I would say to believers who still kind of are like, yeah, I don't believe you Black folks really have all the problems that you're talking about. Or why don't you fix it among yourselves? You can do it. You got it.
Yeah.
Go.
Right.
Yeah.
That's really good.
That is good, man. You all said a lot of practical things. I mean, for those that want to lean into this work of justice, I mean, listen, surround yourself with people who are different, listen to those that are different. Do your own education and make sure that is a priority in your life, but then also tying it back to what you fundamentally believe about your faith. Has God given you gifts? Of course he's given you gifts, right? So what does it look like to use those gifts, use those passions to close some of those gaps? I love that. And I think about another question, and that is just, when I think of Juneteenth, going back to the actual day and celebration of it, what would you say to those? I do think that there's a group of people who may, again, like I would say, this is a conversation I had with my therapist. What would you say to those who are like really concerned with it being commercialized, watered down? I mean, we didn't bring it out here. I totally forgot about it. But there's some wild marketing around Juneteenth. It's crazy. You got one of the photos that Richard found was a Juneteenth salad. Ooh. I don't know how
Juneteenth salad.
A Juneteenth salad.
Oh.
It was real. It was real. Yeah. So like, you know what I'm saying?
What was in it? I'm sorry.
Watermelon and lettuce.
I'm curious. That's crazy.
Sure.
Was that going to make it better?
I mean, like, I just wanted to know the heart behind it. What was the thought? Optimism.
Yeah. Making some money, I think, was the heart behind it. I mean,
that was not a black marketing agency. I can 1,000% assure you that.
Not even in the slightest.
No, we weren't in the room when that decision was made.
We weren't in the building.
So yeah, like what would you say to those folks who want to, like, man, I want to be a part of this celebration, this day, but what would you say, like, what does it look like to not make it like that?
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah, first it's a heart check. If you're doing this for monetary gain, I feel you're already approaching it wrong, right? Coming from a capitalistic mindset, right? What can I get out of this? You're missing the whole essence of it. There are some organizations that I feel that are doing well with it. I saw even an article and just some posts even from Ben and Jerry's, and what I liked about them was that they share resources, etc. And this was before, and I'm gonna call it what it was, the murder of George Floyd. So they didn't just jump on the bandwagon in that moment, but they've been advocating for it and been mentioning it and been speaking out against it. Against oppression, etc. And so I think there's ways to do it. But then, yeah, it's if your goal is to capitalize off of it, then you've already missed.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But how can you help bridge those gaps with the influence that you have, with the resources that you have? If you approach it from that mindset, if you speak truth to power with your influence, then come on, speak. Yeah. Do whatever, let's go.
I love it. I think it also comes back to what you were talking about around relationships, being willing to step outside of your normal circle of relationships to get a better understanding of what some of the issues are. It's hard to be empathetic without having a relationship and some kind of insight into lived experience. It's easy if you're detached. Then it's very easy to just keep doing what you're doing, right? Not my problem. I didn't do it. Good luck, right? But if you start having conversations or you listen to folks like this and you're like, hey, maybe there's something going on, and then you maybe take a next step to say, hey, let me get some people around a table or in my living room, and let me just understand what's happening, right? That might make a difference.
Yeah, I think, honestly, the first thing I think of is kind of what you were hitting at, Richard, is all of our holidays are, most of, if not all, I'll say, of our holidays are geared around, consumerism, capitalism. It's kind of like, I think of everything. I think of Christmas. I think of, how do you make Christmas about Christ? How do you, so when it comes to Juneteenth, I have a similar feeling of it's less about the day and more about the other, 364 days of the year. It's what you're doing with your other time so that this day then has its value. This day holds the weight it should. And you kind of know what to do with that day because every other day is filled with, everything else we're hitting at, reconciliation and education and being in community with other people and just lived experience. And then you hit Juneteenth and you're trying to go to the cookout.
It's your family.
And it's your Sabbath.
You're marking the moment.
And, I feel like that is where my heart is kind of starting to lie with it.
Something like that.
Yeah, that's good. And I would say too, spread the word about it as well. I think when going back to our earlier, conversation around it, I don't, it's hard for me to get away from the educational piece when I think about Juneteenth. For me, I see it as being a part of it. And again, we have to make sure we fight to tell those stories. But if you are a person in majority culture, it's really impactful for you to share, hey, did you know that this is what this day represents?
Yeah.
And here is what we can do about it today. So I just think that, all of everything that you all have said, and I would just tack on share it, share it on your platforms with your people, with your folks. Well, I would love for you all to give just a final thought, Juneteenth related. What would you want to leave the people with as we conclude our discussion together?
I'm probably predictable at this point. Step into some of those gaps. Learn some more and just step into some of those gaps.
That's it.
Doesn't have to be big, can be small, right? But just recognize that this is not just a Black people problem. This is an all-American problem. And if we want to build a more just society, everybody has to kind of step up and do something.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
That's good. All right.
May the Lord watch between.
Just pray.
Let's pray.
No. Yeah. I kind of want to separate it up a little bit because I don't know if a universal thing I can say right now. To my Black brothers and sisters, show up, continue to fight, and know that you're not alone. Continue to fight for equality and for justice. Know that you're not alone. And if you don't think anybody else is praying for you, I don't even know your name, but I'm praying for you and with you right now. And then if you find yourself a part of majority culture, please listen. Please just take some time to listen and to have a conversation. A little bit goes a long way.
Okay, that's good.
Well, I'm torn between two statements. One, knowledge is power. Educate yourself and educate those around you. And another, and also in an age where we have so much access to so much information. So with that comes the disclaimer of fact checking and, making sure what you're reading is accurate. Don't just take that TikTok at face value, even though I know you want to. Go, and fact check it, but also, educate yourself, share it with others. Because I think half the battle, as we know, with Juneteenth is even finding out the truth and getting the information there. And the other part was just to remember, I think that we live in a very individualistic society, and especially in America and westernized culture. It's about, it's just, we are taught individualism. So I think keeping that in mind, and I think Black people, we're raised in community. We already have, and a lot of actually other, non-Black groups, kind of have that community mindset. But it's the idea that once again, you're connected to this, and we are all connected to this. And, you know, one group's oppression impacts your group's oppression, or impacts your group in general. So I think it's just remembering that we are a larger community, especially of believers. Like, we are called to identify with each other, as we know. So that'd be my other thing.
Yes. That's good. That's good. Man, well, thank you all so much for sharing your heart, sharing, just what you have gone through, what you've seen, and how you connect to Juneteenth. My hope is that, you know, our discussion is helpful. I believe that it's going to be helpful for those who watch and listen. And I'm hopeful as well. I'm hopeful that more conversations like this will take place. I'm hopeful that those that are part of our Soul City community will see this as, oh yeah, maybe I could do something like this. Maybe I can share a post. Maybe I can read this book. Maybe I can step into this particular gap. And I believe that Jesus is going to continue to work in and through us to bring transformation. So again, we just say thank you to everyone listening and watching. And until next time, see you.
Smash that subscribe button.
Right.